Evelyn, I am so excited to dive into this conversation on chemtrails. It is something that has hit so close to home for so long for me in my health journey that to find someone else who has some information and has done some research on it, I'm really excited to open this conversation up.
Me too. And I'm not sure I'll have all the answers, but it's something I've definitely been privy to for a long time and am interested in like the unfoldment
Yeah.
of the information.
Yeah, I'm sure all of you have seen the clouds in the sky, normal clouds, right? We have normal clouds, and then we see these stripes that happen, and they form it's almost like they're playing a game with the tic-tac-toe effect or the big X's in the sky or the continual lines. And now these are what they want us to believe is contrails, correct?
Right.
And can you tell us what a typical contrail does after, I don't know, maybe a minute?
Well, just from observation and watching, learning more about the difference between a chemtrail and a contrail, right? I will say I'm not a scientist,
Right.
but I am an observer. And what I've observed is that contrails will dissipate rather quickly. They evaporate into the sky. And I'm not sure what the chemical compounds are of contrails, but I know that they disperse like very quickly, and it's almost like you can see the plane going, like it's before it's even past the horizon or
Right.
past the point of visibility that it's gone.
Dissipates.
Yeah.
Right. It's usually hot air. So this is something that my father has worked for the FAA and was an air traffic controller, the manager for years, and so has worked in the government as well as for Boeing. So it's a conversation that him and I have had for years, and he's always on the side that I'm misinformed, right? So
Right.
I've got to hear kind of both sides of this idea, what a contrail typically is. And it typically disperses within less than a minute, right? You see those out of normal airplanes. Now, certain airplanes at higher altitudes and higher um, uh, temperatures or lower temperatures in the sky, it can last longer,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if it's colder, it typically can last longer, the compound. But with something that they're actually spraying in the sky for whether it's geoengineering or dubious effects. I mean, it could be really anything at this point. Now they say cloud seeding,
Mm-hmm.
and like looking into cloud seeding further, that is very well known that they're doing that. Do you know
Yeah.
a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah. And then also you'll notice a very strong difference with cloud seeding or chemtrails versus contrails with how the vapors expand and they
Right.
last in the sky for hours. And
Right.
then you'll see them like an hour or two later, and they've just dispersed and created sort of a fog. And the color is different too. Like it's a little gray brown
Yeah.
versus the blue or the clear, more like whiter,
Wetter
more
clouds.
pure looking, whiter cloud. You can definitely tell the difference. It does make things look a little hazy. But yeah, so the cloud seeding, it's been happening for decades, and it's been going on since the 60s. And The United States government used cloud seeding technology in warfare.
Mhm.
That's a known fact. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a fact. Like, it's
Right.
not even a conspiracy and it's not even a theory. It's just something that's very readily available to find out.
Right. And and tell us a little bit more about that, because I know I looked into Operation Popeye, which they
Mhm.
then changed the name quite a few times. And so you can look up that, you can look up Operation Motor Pool. But it's all under chemical warfare used in Vietnam. And I'm sure
Mhm.
they had this technology even before then, and we're doing it for other reasons. But tell us a little bit
Yeah.
more um, about that operation.
Sure. I think before I get in that, I want to go a little bit in the history of cloud seeding and like
Mhm.
when it started, because it started in 1946 and was originally used as a way to um, lessen the strength of hurricanes. So that was the original purpose of cloud
Interesting.
seeding, of that what they were trying to do was for, the 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 common good is to lessen the impact of hurricanes. But what ended up happening was that it was the opposite effect,
Right.
that it made
So that
things
would be my
worse.
right. So by putting, because they used to use dust and things like that, like very simple
Yeah,
pounds.
yeah, because it's the particles that create the particles that attach to water molecules that bring them down to Earth.
Right.
So if you have anything that's slightly heavier, that it's dust, particulates, anything like that that will attach to water molecules will bring it down. So there's this guy named Schaefer who originally wasn't a scientist, but he was a naturalist. He's really interested in understanding nature and the natural effects of nature. And he had a partner named Langmuir, who both of them um, studied this effect of cloud seeding to again try to lessen the intensity of hurricanes. They ended up working with GE for a really
Mhm.
short period of time, but then for legal reasons, GE had to withdraw from the project. And I don't know why that is. There could be some reasons going on. Maybe there was like cross cross projects happening at that time.
Right. Now,
Then
do you know if they were American or did they come from Germany? Because that
they're
it's in 1946, right?
right, yeah, very
Which
good
is right.
question. They're
Yeah.
American.
Okay.
Hmm. And after they got dropped from GE, then the United States military picked them up to help study weather effects. And they started a project called the Project Cirrus, CIRRUS, which was the first large study of cloud physics and weather modification. So these studies have been going on since the 40s, since 1946.
Yeah,
So
which would fall in line with my father's main observation, and that is always they were happening when he was a kid, right? He's like, no, Ash,
right.
I've been watching these things since I was a kid. Now that would have been in the 1960s. And so when I started to do more research into looking into that, it's like, well, then that could have it would have totally lined up.
Could have been going, yeah, it's been going on since he was a kid, and that's why
Yeah.
he's noticed them since he was a kid.
Right.
Mhm. It's not new, and also it's quite archaic if you think about it. It's just a plane going into a cloud spraying stuff. Like,
Right.
it's not some revelatory scientific advancement, it's just like
Right.
kind of
But
basic.
that is very basic, but it gets from the further research I've done, it gets even more um what's the word, more challenging to figure out the bits and pieces, right? Because the idea originated with just the idea of it spraying stuff in the sky.
Mhm.
Then they realized that those particles were so few and far in between that it really wasn't going exactly where they wanted it to. So that's how that technology, I feel like, with then the addition of HARP, right, which we'll get into,
Yeah.
made it even more of a control mechanism.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is could potentially be like so there's weather modification, there's geoengineering, and then there's weather as warfare.
Mm-hmm.
So there's different organizations and avenues of study for this technology. And I think it's important to keep in mind that those are all different avenues when it comes to like scientific studies and advancements.
Right.
But yes, sorry, going back to Vietnam and this cloud seeding that happened, that's probably the most clear documentation that we have available to us that's been declassified at this point of weather modification for weapon warfare, for weather warfare specifically, which was the United States government cloud seeding every single day over Ho Chi Minh and Vietnam during the war, specifically to cause landslides, flash floods, monsoons, and it displaced thousands and thousands of people. Very traumatic. Killed tons of people also. And because of that, the UN in 1978 decided to no longer allow for weather warfare to be a part of the, war. It was, I guess, their treaty.
Arsenal, like the
Yeah. Yeah. So it just proves that it happened and that we already have laws against the use of it in warfare. And now, who knows exactly what the laws say? Who knows what the workarounds are? Who knows if it's just cloud seeding specifically, not talking about other forms of weather modification. But that specifically was put on the chopping block for the UN, only UN countries, I should
Okay.
say. Other
Okay.
countries who aren't a part of the UN aren't a part of this treaty.
That's interesting, right? That's really interesting.
Mhm.
Because, and then if you think about the weather in Vietnam, right, it is monsoonish. It is very rainy and tropical. So
Yeah.
it would only heighten those effects there that were already kind of going on, and to take out routes for troops, right? So they were
Yeah.
trying to take out like military supply routes and things like that.
It was very effective.
Right. Yeah. It was interesting because I've listened to a couple ex Vietnam veterans talk about their mission there after it was declassified. They could start to talk about it. So that was it was eye-opening. It's eye-opening to know that all these things start typically with a government funded operation or experiment, and then it can turn into something even more sinister. And that seems to be kind of
Right.
where it's come to, in my opinion. Now I know it's like I feel like it's almost it's not really a normal thing to talk about, and people have always said, oh, Ashlan, you're such a conspiracy theorist, and you're such this and you're such that. And I think when you really know what's going on in your body and you really know what affects it, and you start to understand the correlation between the environment you're living in and the effects on your health, because that's what was happening with me in 2014, that I started to understand that, oh, I'm actually not having the easiest time in this environment. That's when I was living in Burbank and California, and they were literally just every day. I mean, the pictures I have from that time period, and I started to document every time I would see it happen, and then how I would feel by about 7 o'clock that night. And it would just be a headache. And it was a lot of stuff in the back of my neck, and it would radiate through the front of my head. And by about 2016, 2017, there were days that I would just be missing because I couldn't function the same. And then I started to look into the toxicology of heavy metal poisoning and heavy metal effects on the body. And it was in complete alignment with that, with having too much heavy metals in your body. So I knew it was something I was breathing in because I have respiratory stuff already. And so it was like, oh, I'm actually being affected by my environment. And then what is actually going on, right? And so now more and more people are talking about it. What have you seen the documentary called Dimming?
I haven't.
It's incredible. I should have sent that to you after I watched it, but you'll have to watch it. There's a website called Geoengineering Watch, and the researcher, the main person on it, his name is Dane Whittington. And I have to say, I'm sure he's gotten a lot of grief over the time he's been doing this type of research and putting the stuff out there. And it's always, they want to make that person seem crazy. Like, oh, he's crazy. But he's ex-military. I believe he was in the Navy. He lived in Mount Shasta, moved up there to get away from everything, started a solar power company, and thought, oh, this is so, because he was only getting about 40% of his actual solar power effects from in Mount Shasta. And it was because there was this stuff covering the sun all the time. And so he started to look more into it, doing more research, started testing the water, testing the ground, testing the trees in Mount Shasta, and found really high levels of everything from barium to silver to iodine to all sorts of heavy metals. I don't think it was iodine, it was aluminum. Sorry. And so started to kind of put two and two together, and then started to do a lot more research on what was actually coming out of the planes. And they took a small plane up there a couple times that had a experiment collector on the front of it, and to collect whatever was in the air, and then started to chase these trails. And then see what was actually in them, and the actual evidence that came back. I mean, it's in that documentary, but it was absolutely mind-blowing. It was that, okay, well, that was solid proof that there was something more coming out of these trails than just hot air.
And they say that, well, they don't say, because we're not supposed to know this yet, right? We're not supposed to know that things are getting sprayed in the air. But if you do know that things are getting sprayed in the air, and there is any sort of talking points about it in the media, it's all talked about, it's silver iodide. And that's like it's silver iodide. It's totally fine. It doesn't harm the body. It's totally natural. And also salt too. A combination of salt and silver iodide is used to bring water particles down in the ground. But that's the popular, like, mainstream thing that they tell us. There's so much more going on. And so it requires someone like him to figure it out and do his own research and then find out exactly what it is.
Right. And have more people start to do more research, because I think these people can be shut down really quickly just because, you start talking about stuff and uncovering stuff. Nobody really likes when people do that, right? It's like,
Yeah.
no, we've got this far. We're gonna keep doing whatever is going on, but it's under this disguise of climate change now, right? So the sun is warming, the earth is warming, whether it's man-made or whatever. And so now we're going to start to blanket this sun, and you'll see just big clouds just over the sun, and then to have a cooling effect.
Yeah.
But what it actually does is it locks in, it's like putting a blanket over the pollutants in the air. And so it locks all this stuff in a way that almost keeps it trapped and creates a pressure between the clouds and the earth. And so the people are getting all of this mixed crap, whether it's coming from the cloud seeding or it's coming from the in-between released toxins from cars and just human activity. It's not being released.
Right. And then, so there's multiple different forms of like weather modification. There's, like you're mentioning, the dimming of the sun by creating a blanket in the atmosphere so that less sun rays hit the earth and it kind of just bounces off of the particles. And then there's the cloud seeding, which they claim is using silver iodide to make more rain or create more rain where they want rain. So there's multiple different ways of weather modification that's already occurring, that's already happening right now.
Right.
And what I think is really interesting is the dialogue around it. Like what I see on the news media, for instance, they're like bringing it up as if it's a question of whether it should happen when it's already happening. Like, should scientists, there's this new form of technology that is going to help climate change. Should scientists explore this area? And it's like, well, we're already doing that. Like it's the programming of the media that's like, okay, we're just going to drop a little bit of information at a time and let people get accustomed to it until it's common knowledge or it's a possibility, because that's like in our country and the way that our psyche functions at this point, because it's so trained by Hollywood, is that we don't believe anything is possible until, like, it just takes a long freaking time for people to believe that something is happening or is possible. And that's kind of the one way that they do it, is like, we'll just drop a little bit at a time because they don't think that we can handle the information. They don't think we can handle the truth.
Well, right. But I don't even think they don't think we can handle it. I think it's a form of brainwashing, right? It's a form of, what do they call that? When you have a captor and they get you to, stay and it's like they get you, but it's like a form of,
I always forget that word.
I know it's very specific. We'll have to come
not
back
Manchurian. It's
I know Manchurian candidate. It's Munch. Is it Munch?
No, Munchausen is when you believe that you have a certain sickness, I think.
Okay.
But it's
the one where they get you to believe, they legitimately mess with your brain so much that they get you to continue to
Stockholm syndrome.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yes. So you stay you stay like a good, human. Okay. Well, they wouldn't do that. No, they're not doing that yet. Oh, look, they're telling us. Oh, look, they're showing that this is a possibility or whatever, right? Instead of them actually they've been doing it, and then looking further into HAARP, the organization of HAARP, and then these radio towers. So then when I started to understand the radio towers and then the frequency of the radio towers, and then if you're putting heavy metals of any kind, aluminum or silver or whatever it is, into the atmosphere, you're able to control them with the frequency, with the radio frequency. So then all of a sudden, oh, you have a very clear day, right? But then you're able to kind of put the stuff in the sky and then all of a sudden it's covered. Why is that? It doesn't even necessarily disperse completely, but it completely covers it. Well, it's because they're sending radio waves up and it's continually moving the things where they want it to go. It's why and so for me, that's like why the tornadoes and why everything has gotten since hurricane. If you think about Hurricane Katrina, since that time, it's went from, yes, we've had disasters before, that's no question, but it went from, now it's so consistent. So the idea that it's global warming or all these other things it's been planted. That was planted in the late 90s. And I fully was on board with that. I was 18 years old, was very, very like much into that. Leonardo DiCaprio came out and did that movie, and Al Gore and all that stuff. So that started that. And then if they're actually creating these things that make it actually feel that way, then it plays into what everything they've wanted you to believe the whole time. But what's the true effect on human health, right?
Right. That's
and
the
it's
ethical
looking
concern.
like it's really playing a bad role in everything from health, our human bodies, to our food, to people who were back in 1999 able to eat most things, and now within 20 years you can eat maybe a quarter of what you could eat prior, because it's undigestible really by the human body. Now I don't know if that has to do with the cloud seeding or with whatever's coming down from that, but there's some correlation between the two for me.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely the overuse of land and the overuse of man-made chemicals and toxins to manipulate the earth to do whatever it needs to, to speed up time or to speed up production or what have you, rather than allowing the earth to regenerate itself naturally. Also, going back to that, I don't know much about, I've kind of stayed out of the dialogue of 5G. I haven't really dove too much into it. But when you talk about how the heavy metals are in the sky and can be manipulated through radio waves, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense. And I just watched this documentary on cloud seeding called How to Kill a Cloud, which is the story of this Finnish scientist who goes to the Arab Emirates to study weather modification in the United Arab Emirates, because they have, it's a very rich country in oil, but it's the desert. So they're constantly trying to figure out how to manipulate the land so they can live off of this rich earth that they have, and not really sacrifice or change their lifestyles, so they spent the documentaries follows this scientist who gets chosen to research this project for 3 years on cloud seeding and weather modification in the United Arab Emirates. What I think is so fascinating is that this scientist didn't even know about the United States history with cloud seeding. Like, she didn't even know. And we watched this press conference where they're asking questions, and there's some journalists from other countries that are like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's illegal in some countries to do.
Right.
And she's like, oh, I didn't know. I'm like, you're a scientist. How do you not know? And to me, that whole, when we get to the conversation around ethics, right, is like these scientists believe that what they're doing and believe that the work that they are producing is for the betterment of all, or for the good of humanity, and that all, their passion is with discovering new scientific methods for evolving humanity, but they don't really consider the history and the governments that are paying them. Like,
Right.
you don't know what, at the end of the day, the question comes up of, well, the United Arab Emirates is under Sharia law. Does that bother you? Being a woman scientist. And
Yeah.
she's like, well, I believe that they're working for the good of science and, I'm like all of these excuses, and it's human, I don't, no fault of her own, it's human, but I don't know how many scientists at this point have suggested that they regret what they've created
Done. Yeah.
and what they've done.
Oh, okay. So
And in
agree.
the documentary, they also mentioned too that the United States is currently testing nanotechnology for geoengineering, which would go in line with what you're talking about with the 5G towers.
That on top, yes, that is, and that plays a huge, huge part of it. And it's why in 2020 they were able to keep everyone at home in this whole, the whole time. And you saw these towers being put up and built in areas where prior to 2020 and 2019, we had people in our neighborhood in Studio City petitioning these installations of these towers. I mean, coming to the, put flyers out, and just door to door was a whole thing about the warfare effects of 5G, which 5G has also been used in war. I mean, that's well documented. Sound and frequency has been used in war. And all of a sudden these towers were going up in all these areas. But what a great way to do it, right? A great way to do it would be to keep everyone at home or locked away and not see it actually happen. And then you come out and then it's all there. They did it in the schools as well. That was a big part of keeping the kids home. Well, then they equipped all the schools, at least in Burbank, USD, with all this technology. And now my son, who's super sensitive, he's so similar to me, comes home and complains of headaches most days. And so I know he's sensitive to the frequency.
So since I haven't dug into the 5G dialogue or discourse, what is the purpose of
5G?
Yeah, and is it to affect the human mind?
So I've only done a little bit. I mean, I will be real. I've done a little bit of research. I've read a few things, but from what my understanding is it's meant to not just affect the human mind. It's a frequency that's similar to the human frequency. So if you can send certain radio waves into someone's body, let's say, and through this whatever, they can have the similar effects that whatever the frequency wave is, because it will start to it's almost like you send it out and your body doesn't know the difference between itself and that frequency.
So could it affect your emotions, let's say, and how you feel?
Possibly. I always thought it could affect something like we have heart disease, or we have some sort of thing that all of our what if our body starts to feel like like it needs to attack something inside of our body, our immune system? Maybe like it could affect our immune system in theory, right? And make it attack itself. Also, the mind thing has to come into play, because I know when used in warfare, right? When any type of frequency is used in warfare, it makes people go crazy,
Mm-hmm.
right? You start to feel like, like you're you're gonna explode almost, like your brain.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, but that's something we could definitely look further into. I think
Yeah.
that it all is I mean, it's all a part of it. And what's so funny, my father said something the other day, because um he's a realist. He's a big realist. He's also, worked in the US government for years as well as other jobs. But this is a part of what makes all these things conspiracy, is they all sound a little bit of true. They all have a little bit of truth, or it could all sound a little bit true, but it's so easy for them to debunk it and say, no, you're crazy for saying that, because this and this, and spit out some random facts. So
Mm-hmm.
I think these are all pieces to the puzzle. And also, when we talk about Hollywood is always put pieces out before
Oh, totally.
the
Oh,
actual thing
100%.
happened,
It's how they get a lot of funding is through the military, the United States government, like Avengers, I believe was um
Was
funded
Endgame, because
by.
I was so convinced Endgame was I was like, and maybe it was because I have boys, but I've seen it so many times too.
Yeah,
And
boys,
then,
you've seen a lot of military Hollywood movies because they
yes.
have to get clearance with the military, and work closely with the military, especially with those action movies and war movies, because they have to be sure that they're not portraying something or sharing something like technology that
Mm,
is a security risk. And so they
yes.
work directly with the military to create the technologies in these movies. And then the military, has all these advanced technologies and like, hey, yeah, you could throw this in there. And it becomes this fantastical fantasy made up world that is so out of the ordinary. So like you use directed energy weapons in a kid's, action movie, but the person that's using the directed energy weapon is like a villain, half human hybrid monster creature that's totally fantastical. So then your mental image of a directed energy weapon is through the eyes of Hollywood, which is like this imaginary fantasy,
Mm,
not real creature. And you can't put the two together like, oh, it's an actual human being sitting at a desk pressing a button to send a directed energy beam out. That's the reality of it. But they
yeah.
create this like amazing, impossible to believe scenario with real life technologies so that you create this image in your mind, and then you watch the news and then it's kind of like, oh, that's kind of like in a movie that I saw. But the thing is they've already implanted that idea into you that it's not
Mm,
real, because what's that thinking in and of itself already? Oh, that's like a movie. No,
right.
that's like reality because it's real. So when you watch the news, a lot of times you hear people, it's like a movie, or I can't believe it, or it's unbelievable. But that's the Hollywood mind control mechanism to keep you in this daze of fogginess, to not know what's real
What's
when
real,
you
right?
see it.
Right. There was
Mhm.
we were just talking about yesterday, the frequency of music and how the hertz changed from
Yeah.
used to be, gosh, and I wish I had this written down, but it used to be a very specific frequency that was in alignment with like joy and
It's like
this very
437 or something.
something like that, 432, something, and then they changed it in
Yeah.
I want to say like in the 40s or something. It was some
Yeah.
like a long time ago.
It was
To
during World War II.
okay,
Yeah.
that
The
would make
Germans
sense
changed it.
to a more to a mind control frequency.
Yeah,
Or
to be more, so I just looked it up really quick.
thank you.
It was 440 and they changed it to 432. 440,
Was it
um, let me just double check that it's
okay?
not the reverse. 432 frequency heightens perception, increases the mental clarity of a person, and unlocks intuition. Oh, it went from 432 to 440. That's what I thought,
That's
because
what I
it
thought
was
too. I was like, because 432
slower.
is what we were playing at the
Yeah,
event on the over the weekend. I was like, oh no.
yeah, I'm glad I figured that out. 432 to 440, which heightened it and elevated it. And I think, yeah, what you're saying or what you were alluding to is like the heart beats to or is in the same frequency range as 432, and then at 440, which is what the Germans switched it to during World War II, so that there was more energy, more excitement, more like aggression with the music, because they realized the Germans knew so much about mind control
They
and the
did. I
subconscious
know.
mind, and they used that technology in propaganda. They're like, there's so many things they did that I think many countries are learning from, like propaganda playbooks and how to manipulate a society to rally behind a cause that they may not morally even believe in,
Yeah.
or in their hearts even believe in, but the body reacts to all these stimulus external of itself. And when you don't have control over your mind, or you believe that your mind and your thoughts are you or are real, that's like the slippery slope that we go into, because your thoughts can be easily manipulated at any given moment. As a hypnotist, I am very surprised and scared and excited when I hear about how easy it is to hypnotize people.
Mhm.
Um, it's our bodies are so sensitive to external stimulation that, like, it's so easy to manipulate our thoughts, our feelings, just through different energy and sound and words that are used, that have an inherent meaning in it, right? You use symbolism against people, or you use symbolism, the word, the color, the sound it makes, to elicit a feeling or elicit a thought. And then that creates an action and if you're unaware of your thoughts and your feelings, and you're just reacting to the external stimulation around you, you're very susceptible to mind control and manipulation.
Mm. I totally agree. And what I also wanted to say is that in the after World War II, everybody just thinks that we like must have killed all the Nazis or something happened with, in that realm. But
They
it was
go.
yeah, it's like, no, we hired them and we brought them here to America to work in government, close with our own scientists.
Yep.
And that's the story of the American journey. And unfortunately, I think that there's way more, and not that, all Germans it was that regime had such power and such control over its people that
Mhm.
the knowledge behind that was more valuable than anything else.
100%. There's a really great 3-part BBC documentary called Century of Self
Mm,
that goes deep into the history of propaganda, media mind control, and how it works, and also, like you're saying, the use of the United States government knowledge of German technologies, which was, it's called Project Paperclip. Project Paperclip
mm,
is when the
yeah,
United States government had all of these German scientists come on board and just start working with the military, and like MK, we can get into other things like MK
yeah.
Ultra was
There's
like,
so many. I would
mhm,
love to have a conversation about MK Ultra because I don't know quite as much about that as I do other like uh you know, the Manhattan Project or the Philadelphia experiment, things like that. But yes,
yeah,
there's so many to dive into.
there's so many. And it's when you learn about at least 2 or 3 of them, it becomes impossible to ignore any of the other ones, like,
Right.
5G mind control technology. It's like, sure, yeah, I mean, why not? Why, when we think of to Havana syndrome, which was first documented in 2016, which is, so Havana syndrome is it was first uh experienced, I suppose, by US delegates in Havana,
In Cuba?
Cuba, at the US embassy there. They were just getting mysteriously sick. They had headaches. They were out. There were some of them are still have physical ailments up till
What?
this time, because now started in 2016, and now it's coming out that, yeah, they were victims of directed energy weaponry. Who was it? We don't know.
Wow.
Who did it? Who knows?
Right.
But they were literally getting beamed with radio waves
Frequency.
and frequencies back in 2016.
It makes sense. So what were their symptoms? Just headaches and
Headache, fatigue, drowsiness. I think some of them had cardiac issues afterwards.
interesting.
Like, yeah, severe fatigue. I think some had nausea as well. So
Mm,
just like not feeling, feeling off, confusion, dizziness,
mm-hmm.
um, ringing in the ears as well.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
So I wonder if they could do that because that falls in line with this, with this, even with stuff going up in the sky with the cloud seeding or whatever.
Right.
Um, I wonder if they could do that on a larger scale? Because it sounds like you're describing like COVID or something. You're describing the symptoms, um, part of them.
Curious. Interesting. Yeah, I wonder. It seems like it would probably take a lot of energy for that to happen.
Right. Well, the
Um,
satellite. So if we think about like what it looks like above Earth, uh, and the amount of satellite coverage that we have,
yeah,
and then it's beaming off of towers. I mean, maybe in theory,
yeah,
we're
yeah.
getting to that point.
Oh, I sent you a video that I found. So there's this person that I followed called Dutch Since
Yes, I saw that.
on YouTube, and he tracks weather, he tracks earthquakes.
Okay.
He's really fascinating. He's been doing it for years, and he's kind of an outlier in the scientific community, obviously, because
Okay.
what's so cool about his videos is he'll go to an earthquake his theory is that earthquakes happen very systematically, that
Okay.
you can track and follow earthquakes because they follow a wave pattern. But also on top of that, he's since discovered that there's a ton of earthquakes that happen at these oil drilling sites. And
Really?
yes, so he'll zoom in, he'll say, oh, cool, here's an earthquake. Oh, looks like USG just decided to knock it down a point, but it was and he tracks it like in real time, and he'll go zoom in, and you'll see, just like in Utah, for example, that entire state is an oil field, the whole entire state. He goes over it and you see like just like a web over the
Uh-huh.
entire mountainside of oil drilling points.
Oh my
And it's like,
gosh.
oh, look, there's a bunch of earthquakes here. Look at all
Is
these oil drilling
is it
points.
because it goes down so far and then
Yeah, because
causes?
it's fracking. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah. It's the fracking sites. And it's mind blowing. And so on the videos too, the one that I sent you, and maybe
Yeah.
we can link the video
Yeah, we
in
can
the
link it.
description, where he follows this cloud pattern that vibrates. It's only over the United States, and it's nowhere else. He goes to other parts of the world
Yeah.
and there's no vibration. He goes back and forth, back and forth. It happens. It starts at like 3 a.m. Eastern time and
Mhm.
then stops right when the sun comes up.
That that's wild. So
Mhm.
why are they doing it at night?
So no one sees. So the weather reporter isn't going to look at it. And he
Okay.
mentioned in the video, the local weather man even made a note of, wow, that's a strange anomaly that's happening. But if it's happening in, you know, 3 a.m. to 5 a.m., who's watching the weather at that time? Like, who
Right.
needs to know what the weather is? And it's just so wild to see. And so he thinks there's some sort of like wave
Yeah, have you
happening.
seen them where they're when the clouds look like waves? It's like a
Yeah.
microwave effect.
Hmm.
Have you seen that? Because
I,
you see it here a lot. It's like it looks like it was and you know that there's some frequency going on.
yeah, interesting.
But
Yeah.
the nighttime thing that's been happening. I and the reason I know it's been happening is because I've had so many people tell me, like, why are they spraying at night? Why are they covering the moon? What is happening? And it's like, and I would have no theory behind that because it doesn't line up with their uh, global warming theory. They're
Hmm.
not they're not blocking the sun. They're blocking the moon.
Hmm.
What's the moon have to do with any of this?
I don't know. It could be that there's more water particles in the air at night because the
Maybe
temperature, it
is
could be
dropped.
temperature related. Um,
That's true. Yeah, I've never been able to wrap my head around that one so much as to maybe it's just because they're spraying something in the sky that would affect the clouds during the day.
mm,
Or affect the earth. But I think that's why all of this is so conspiratorial. It's like there's no real clear answer to any of it other than, yes, we know what's happening. Yes, we see it. Yes, there's scientific evidence, and then also governmental proof beyond this, people noticing. There was something that just came out about magnetic rain, people having layers on their car of like a substance. It's almost like it it's rain and it looks like water droplets dried, but they're scraping it together with a razor blade
mm.
and then putting a magnet to it, and
Oh,
it's magnetized.
interesting.
Really, yeah. Really interesting, right? So if it's that much magnetic energy or magnetic particles coming down, imagine how that is in our own lungs. Imagine how that is in our drinking water, in anything. So that's really where I feel like people need to be more aware, and we're not, it's like, how can we bring it to a level where anything changes? I have a hard time seeing something change in that arena without there being a unmasking, unveiling
Yeah.
of the effects on what this is doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And since I live out in the desert and I don't have buildings anywhere blocking my
Right.
view of the sky, I see these chemtrails. It's not every day, right? And that's the thing. Like, it's, if it were every day, then, sure, it's a plane. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And it's not, and it's throughout the weather's pretty consistent out here. It's through, especially throughout the summer, there isn't a lot of change in temperature. Like, it's pretty consistent. You can tell. It's like, oh, it's not only happening on cold days. It's not only happening on hot days. Like, no, it's happening literally
All the time.
very random, sporadically. But I have started noticing, oh, I see a ton of chemtrails today. It's probably going to rain in a couple days. And then there's like clouds or rain in the forecast for the next, it doesn't always rain, but that's been the pattern for me now at this point, the last couple of years, where I'm like, oh, look at all the chemtrails. Seems like they're going to try to make it rain. So, and then it did, the last one a week ago, and then it rained in the desert. I'm like,
Yeah,
yep.
that's what's been going on here. Agora, it's interesting because like where I am, it's not as much, but when you go into the city, it's all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like they're doing it all the time in heavily dense
Yeah.
population areas versus, when you're kind of a little bit more removed.
Yeah. And I wonder, I'm like, well, what purpose would they have to spend all this money on cloud seeding in the desert? And then I remember the largest military base is out here.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, just one town over. It's the largest military base in the country. So, also too, they have the technology to spray certain chemicals in the sky to make it impossible for a satellite to see through.
Oh,
Yeah, to deflect satellite imagery.
that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
But from my understanding or my research, it's the chemicals being used are aluminum, barium, and oh gosh, it was one more. It wasn't lead. They used lead in the Operation Popeye. It was lead and silver iodine. Yeah, that's crazy.
Wow.
I know. But those are the things from military bases. So those big containers of those types of things are going onto military bases, and then they're disappearing. Like, because they're not telling people what it's being used for.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I don't even know if the people driving the planes know what they're doing, because I would assume they would, right?
Yeah.
I would assume that if this is an operation, this is a big operation.
Right. Yeah.
But, the people on the military bases who are checking in these chemicals or whatever, from them speaking out, some of them have spoken out, they don't know what it's being used for, but there are lots of evidence that things go missing. It's particularly those chemicals.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to start tracking now for myself whenever I have noticed it. I haven't been very on it, but I have
Yeah.
noticed here and there I'll see, and out here again, like I said, it's so obvious. Like it's so obvious when there's chemtrails because it's everywhere. And there's also patterns that they do. Now I've started to notice like
The
it's
patterns are so, it's like
everywhere.
you're just fucking with us. Like,
There's one that goes like up and then
really?
over and then up. I'm like, okay.
It looks like tic-tac-toe in the sky here, most, a
Mm,
lot. And you're just like, this is like you now you're just joking. Um,
mhm.
but all I can say is if anyone out there is experiencing like the effects of these things or is affected by them, maybe they have respiratory issues or
Mhm.
any of that, to stop the absorption of heavy metals into the body or to start to absorb them. Charcoal's great, but cilantro. So
Mhm.
I eat a lot of cilantro, and
Mm.
that, I know it seems crazy, but that actually helps with heavy metal detoxification.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and also it's a really great time to, and if you haven't noticed, maybe just start tracking
Yes.
your your
Track.
patterns,
Yes.
your feeling, your emotions, your headaches, things like that, how you feel. If you're foggy, for me, I started noticing that I get really foggy. I just get really kind of in a daze when I see all the chemtrails, or I don't see it and then think, but I'm just like, oh, I correlate it similarly to you, like later on in
Right.
the day, I'm just like tired and
Tired.
it's just my brain, it's hard to think clearly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, the sky is brown. It's brown.
It's yeah, and recently it's been almost metallic. So here I've taken a lot of imaging of just, it's almost like a rainbow effect. You
Hmm.
can see little rainbows in the sky and there's no rainbow and there's no, it didn't
Hmm.
rain, and it's really weird. So it's like if you were to pour oil over something and you
Mm.
see in the chemical oil slick, like that kind of rainbow eerie effect.
Right.
Um, so yeah, it's hey, you'll look like a crazy person out there tracking, taking pictures with your phone, but I do it all the time. So and now it's just like, I don't even know where you can move to in this country where where it doesn't happen. Um,
Right.
because everyone I've spoken to, it's really kind of everywhere.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. I really want to know. I'm just really curious to follow the dialogue on mainstream media and just like, what is their timeline with all this? Because just really
mm,
curious to know what they are saying, like where they're at, like, oh, what are we supposed to believe at this point, basically, like what's the storyline that they're going with, like
right. Well,
I'm
you
so
know what? Maybe
curious.
you could look into even the astrology on that, because I feel as though everything we're going into now is well, everything that's been shown since 2020, I feel, and even maybe even before, has been like a not real, because it's going into such an AI extreme, or
Yeah.
that's where they want to project it into, is that we're not seeing anything real anymore, whether it's not necessarily in the sky, but like on just even on people's um, TV screens. Like, how do we know that that person's even really there talking and
I know.
speaking
Oh my gosh,
right now?
yeah.
And they're not being
Uh,
projected because they're in a room in a garage somewhere else.
yeah.
Their image being projected onto the
That's
screen.
why, again, as like, this is why I study the unconscious through hypnosis. And
Mm.
it's my passion, I suppose, at this point, to help people to get to know their unconscious minds intimately so that you can have the awareness of what is yours and what is external of yourself, or a manipulation or predatory in
Right.
any
Right.
way, so that you really do know that, oh, that thought was not, where did that come from? For
Mhm.
instance, that feeling, where did that come from?
Yeah.
Like the detachment, which Uranus and Taurus, and like to talk about that a lot, but
Yeah.
that's, I think, the beauty of Uranus and Taurus for us on a personal level, is the ability to detach from these physical aspects of being that we've so that we've held on to so hard throughout humanity, as if it's our reality
Mm.
or our true selves. Like, your emotions are not really you. Your thoughts are not really you. They're just a product and a byproduct of the environment that your body is in.
Mm.
And that is, I think, the evolution of understanding the conscious mind and the unconscious through Uranus and Taurus, that, yeah, no, we are more than just the physical self. And
Right. Yeah.
when you're able to tap into that, and you are able to not just react it with your emotions or any thought that you have, then you have the power to discern, okay, where did that thought come from? Why did I think that? Where did that feeling come from? And if it makes no sense, then there's a reason why it makes no sense. And that maybe it's coming from a 5G tower. Maybe you're getting thoughts beamed into your brain by aliens. I
Or
don't
we don't
know.
know. We don't know. It could be anything at this point. I mean, that's
Yeah.
really what it feels like. But I think of thinking back to like my childhood, the idea of this even being playing a factor in any part of my life, it'd be like, yeah, no, that's insane, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to think, not even you don't want to think, I didn't even have the comprehension level to to have the idea that they'd be doing something that could potentially harm or affect or kill, or the the people on their in America, or
Yeah.
in this way. So it's really eye-opening to even think like, not everybody has the best intentions, but
Mhm.
how can we yeah, to do exactly what you said, like trust our own intuition and
Mhm.
feelings. Like if something feels off, something's probably off, you know.
Right. And that's the only way that you'd be able to know, I think, the difference between an AI generated president on a screen saying things versus the real thing.
Yeah.
It's, you really have to tap into that deep in knowing, like you were mentioning before too, the, like, how do you know something is real? Like,
Yeah.
it's a definite strong, it's beyond feeling, it's like an instinct, kind of. It's like it's almost like a dropping into a grounded space, that you're like, oh, okay, this, I can move forward with this concept as being something that's real or not real, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
there's a heightened alert state of being when you're trying to be duped or manipulated, or like if you're watching an AI or fake, like a deep fake, for
Yeah.
instance,
Yeah. Yeah.
like there's something inside that's like, I think for me, like
Mhm.
tenses up in the body. That's like,
Does it?
it feels like more like my shoulder, like protective or defensive.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think it's very, very subtle. And then once I come to the realization
Yeah.
of like, oh, this isn't real.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
yes, I think there's an alarming effect from in my perception. It's like an alarm. It's like,
Yeah.
oh no, how many people are believing this? It's like it's
Mm,
it's that. Because I don't, I don't trust much anymore. I feel like unless I know the background, or it really takes me a minute. But I feel like most of my friends and most people are really open to suggestion. So they'll trust it just on face value of like, okay, well, you know what, now I feel okay. Well, the pandemic is over now as of tomorrow, May 11th, right? So now I
wait.
feel safe.
Oh,
Did you know that?
no.
That's
Wait.
what, yeah, they end all the emergency acts, or they end all these protocols,
Oh,
whatever, as May 11th.
oh,
So
wow.
because of, and I'm just using that as an example,
Huh.
like most, people might be like, oh, okay, well then now everything's okay and fine. And now we can move forward in a normal fashion, right? Where that's just that's just them setting a boundary for you, or someone else setting a boundary for you, telling you when
Yeah.
something is to happen and how it's supposed to be. And instead of you innately feeling into your own self of like, there's something off here, this
Hmm.
doesn't this doesn't feel right, this is part of a narrative for something else. um,
Right. Yeah. Because it takes
so
a lot of responsibility, I think, for people to be in that space of, well, what do I do with this? It's so much easier to just be told.
to be told or to ignore.
Yeah.
And I think even with this type of thing, talking about bringing it back to like chemtrails, right? It's much easier to ignore it because you
Yeah.
don't think it's ever going to change. Or
True.
not even that, just because it's easier to live in the Truman Show than it is to try to get out of it. That's
Yeah. And then
how I feel.
also a lot of people don't even realize the effects on their bodies that it's having. Like I love referencing that Portlandia skit where they drink raw milk for the first time,
Right.
and they're having all of these epiphanies like, oh my gosh, I can feel my body. Oh, holy, a headache is gone that I didn't even realize I had this whole time. Like, I feel like I can see clearly. It's like they're waking up from drinking raw milk. But the thing that I always take away from that is like, that really is how it is when you're in a daze or you're in a fog or you're like kind of in this, maybe you're eating certain foods that dampen your perceptibility of,
Yeah.
and you don't even realize it until you've come out of it. So for instance, like these chemtrails, if we're all under this sort of fog and we don't acknowledge it, we're not in tune with our bodies enough to even know that we're under a fog to begin with, then how would, how would people even know what to be angry about, or
Right.
the fact that they're even being like manipulated in any way?
Yeah. No, and it only increases the confusion, right? It
Yeah.
increases the confusion of the population. And then if we're kind of in that bogged state or a confused state, are all of the things that it's almost like, well, is it really happening? I don't know, maybe. And it's not clear. It's
Yeah.
not cut and dry. It's not clear. It's just like the sky, right? Covered, dim. But yes, definitely watch that video, The Dimming.
Mhm.
And this was such a fun conversation. I think
Yeah.
I think it's I feel like there's so much more research that needs to be done, and so many more people that maybe can help start to uncover, you know, what's really going on, or why this would be happening even at night. Um, but yeah,
Mhm.
I love the continuing the like uncovering the research that then makes me feel like I'm not totally crazy.
Yeah, you're not. No, you
No.
rarely are the crazy ones, I guess, at this point.
Right. Right. Well, there was a saying, I don't, oh gosh, it goes back and plays in my head, but it was something about when you can control the weather, you can control the world. And
Right.
I will put down below who said that quote, but it was a very specific quote from the 1940s. And I still feel like that plays a part of it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. A lot of questions that aren't being asked, and a lot of manipulation of global aspects of human existence that we never agreed to be a part of. And
right.
yeah,
But I think as we keep going on, you and I would love to uncover more. So let's
mhm,
come up with our next topic. And um,
yeah,
that was really fun.
definitely.
It was really
There's so
fun.
much more to uncover. Thanks for having me back again. And I
Yeah,
really appreciate all of your knowledge on this topic too.
same, same, same. It was so good. So we'll talk soon.
All
Thank you
right.
so much, Evelyn.
Yeah, thank you.